power competition, shifting alliances, and the strategic use of economic and political influence, those are the themes reshaping global geopolitics. And in this evolving landscape, Africa stands at a pivotal point. With its resources, strategic location, and youthful population, the continent has a real opportunity to assert itself, not as a passive participant, but as an active shaper of global outcomes. We have Charles Abugre, the ED of the International Development Economic Associates, joining us now, I believe from Ghana. Good morning, and thank you for your time on the show.
Good morning, Joanna, and thanks for having me on your show. Yeah. And Happy New Year to you and your viewers.
Yes, thank you very much, and to you too. Now, in the new year, we know a lot has already happened in the first, 16 days. A lot has been happening even before now. There are evident realignments that are ongoing within global power blocks. Economic competition is intensifying. What's your assessment of how Africa is moving amidst all this? We're seeing US isolation. We're seeing EU, China trying to strengthen ties with Africa. How is Africa managing all this?
Thanks. Before I respond to your question, just to wish the Green Eagles lots of luck on the finals. As you mentioned, the year portends a lot of challenges that the continent has to individually as countries and collectively confront. The year ended with and began with a blatant invasion of an oil-rich country, the abduction of its president into another country. And the purpose is very clear. Not only to lay hands on oil, but to block China's role in Venezuela. This is important for Nigeria and every oil-rich country to track and to monitor. Secondly, even the things that seem to be positive signals, like the initiative to renew AGOA and things like the health sector support to Kenya actually also portend a lot of danger. The AGOA renewal is on the back of a market access arrangement with Ethiopia. It seems like a positive thing, which is to help Ethiopia build a new airport. But the purpose of that airport is basically to dump beef and chicken and American goods into the Ethiopian market. It is also basically a response as a way of, once again, blocking the Belt and Road Initiative of China. The Belt and Road Initiative is important for the rest of Africa, so it is important to keep these in mind. The health sector aid support to Kenya, for example, goes with an agreement for total access of medical data, including blood samples, tissue samples, and things like this. So it's a very mercantilist world that we have come back. We are dealing with, and for all of these, Africa needs to keep an eye. In fact, the last point, as an intro to this, is that clearly the world is organizing in geopolitical poles. All of the regions except Africa has a hegemon of a sort. China is the hegemon for Asia. Brazil ought to be the hegemon for Latin America. And Nigeria ought to be the hegemon for Africa. Like the countries around which all of the regional countries coalesce. Now, Africa doesn't have a hegemon. And this is largely because Nigeria has let not just West Africa, but Africa down. The future of Africa lies very much in the way how Nigeria gets its act together or not.
I mean, calling us out directly, you said Nigeria has let Africa down. Africa needs a hegemon. We know there are competitors for that position of hegemon, South Africa, amongst others. But first, in what ways has Nigeria let the continent down? And with the recent reforms we're seeing, do you see the course correction, or is it just a facade?
I think it's not a course correction, it's a course deepening. Nigeria does not need small aid from any country. Nigeria has all the sources, the means to generate its own foreign exchange. Nigeria does not need to borrow in foreign exchange. Nigeria needs to get its revenue earning share and its management properly together. Nigeria needs to stabilize its inflation. And the inflation is not because Nigeria is necessarily spending too much, it's spending badly. When it stabilizes its inflation, it will be able to make use of the Naira a lot more. Nigerians need Nairas to transact business in Nigeria. Big companies may need foreign exchange. That foreign exchange will come from a proper management of Nigeria's natural resource exports and its share. It's failed itself. And what it's trying to do as course correction, which is to begin another austerity program by raising taxes and removing subsidies in areas that are important for expanding aggregate demand, is really to pass on an unnecessary burden to poor people. If it wants to raise taxes, Nigeria is home to the biggest billionaires and millionaires on the continent, second to South Africa. Course correction means a serious effort, one, to ensure that Nigerians have access to cheap energy, given the abundance of energy resources. It's a failure that Nigeria can't provide its ordinary people with basic electricity. And there are no excuses for it. The governments have to take the responsibility seriously for this. One, when they do that, energy costs go down, small businesses grow. They do not need to go and borrow. If they are borrowing from their domestic capital market. Nobody can borrow and reinvest with an inflation rate of 27%, and therefore nominal interest rates about 27%. It is a serious issue, and there is no West Africa that can thrive without Nigeria. When Nigeria was thriving, even geopolitically, Nigeria provided the leadership for dealing with conflicts in the West African region. It does not need an $8 million equipment support from anywhere. It's too tiny. It's a drop in the bucket. It cannot exchange its own sovereignty for small things like this. This is why I think Nigeria has let itself down, it has let West Africa down, and it has let Africa down.
I mean, those are quite heavy postulations there, but you've talked about energy, which is very important. You've talked about interest rates being low. You've talked about the recent reforms, which, for the record, were recommendations, and a lot of African nations are taking those recommendations from the IMF for fiscal consolidations through taxes, removal of subsidies and whatnot. You've also talked about inflation, and if we're talking about inflation in Nigeria, the numbers appear to be looking good. We have seen some sort of, numerically, from the data produced by the MBS, disinflation, with the latest bringing inflation down to about 15% or thereabouts. So it's interesting to hear you say that there's no course correction. Is it that what is happening on the surface is not the actual reality?
It is exchanging austerity for a minor adjustment in the prices. Take a look at what Ghana did recently. Ghana also had to do a little bit of austerity, but it corrected both its interest rate problem, it still had to do more, and its inflation problem, simply by managing its gold reserves. A direct central bank intervention in the gold market that builds up gold reserves, not dollar reserves. Use some of those gold reserves to basically sell off and pay off a lot of the external debt. Inflation rate in Ghana has gone from nearly close to 30% in a year to less than 5%. That is course correction. And it came from just a single intervention. Dealing with your reserves without having to go and borrow. Dealing with the fundamentals of macroeconomic without passing on the burden to ordinary people. And whilst we were doing this, fuel prices have collapsed in Ghana. It's reduced drastically. Ghana is a very small producer of crude. So it imports, just like Nigeria imports refined oil. Nigeria shouldn't be importing refined oil. Thanks to Dangote's intervention, maybe that may come down. The course correction is dealing with the fundamentals that leadership is failing to deal with. They should deal with it. Deal with the management of Nigeria's biggest resource, crude oil. Nigeria has gold. Build up your reserve. And as the economies of the world is changing, you can see that the biggest reserve should not be held in U.S. Treasury bond in the form of dollars. The most stable reserves are natural resources. It's gold, silver, and copper. Nigeria has many of these, gold.
Right.
Course correction is a serious effort to do things differently, not another IMF type program.
Right, and hopefully we see just that. It's a challenge, of course, to the acclaimed African giant. And we have seen and we know that the continent, beyond just Nigeria, has so much to offer. We're resource rich, energy resources, mineral, agriculture, gold, as you have pointed out, so much wealth to be exported. Unfortunately, earlier you did point out that it appears, even with the building of the airport in Ethiopia, we're turning ourselves to a dumping ground, and that's a narrative we have been seeking to alter and change. We've seen a number of deals being struck recently. Recently, we just heard of what's happening with Kenya and China. We're also seeing just recently this year as well, Nigeria and the UAE. What do you make of some of the deals that are being struck on the continent and how Africa is asserting herself in the globe?
Africa does assert herself in some places, such as the United Nations. It takes leadership on, say, the right global rights to, of taxation, of the taxation of corporate profits. It's really done well, led well on that, but not the way it has managed its economy, not the way it has actually delivered African unity and integration. It has to do that properly. Of course, every country needs some foreign investment. There's no doubt about that. And we need market access. There's no doubt about that. But first of all, we have to grow the domestic internal market. And West Africa can do this. And Southern Africa can do this. East Africa can do this. We have to expand the domestic regional markets, even as we seek investment and trade agreements with other markets. But we have to extend our relationship with external players in a manner that does not defeat our attempt to be sovereign, that does not undermine our sovereignty as well. And it is the process of undermining sovereignty in African countries is beginning to show, is beginning to uptick. And leaderships have to take sovereignty seriously, sovereignty at the sub-regional level, and sovereignty at the continental level seriously. They can't do this individually as small countries. They have to take this regional unity and regional integration very seriously. You asked earlier on, you made the point that there are other countries competing to be hegemon. Yes, South Africa, but South Africa has a major problem. It's an inherited an apartheid regime that has created a certain level of anger and impatience among Black South Africans vis-a-vis other Africans. And so that relationship, that environment that will provide the integration not only in the Southern African region, which itself is a problem because Angolans have a problem, working and living in South Africa and so on, and so has Zimbabwe. That has a problem. They're solving it. The ANC has made a good effort to deal with it. But it is a serious issue, which is why its ability to become a major rallying point for all of Africa is limited. Nigeria doesn't have those sorts of problems. Mm-hmm. Egypt is also a different issue. Egypt is both African and Arab, more Arab. It has to deal with this Israeli problem. So, in a sense, Egypt is limited in the way in which it could become a rallying point for Africa. So, in the geopolitical process, if we really want to, take advantage of changes of markets, we should get our act together, country by country, in reducing unnecessary indebtedness to foreign exchange, and we should take regional integration seriously. And we can't do so without holding on to our sovereignty. Talking about holding on to our sovereignty, there are signals currently that are also quite disturbing, both in Nigeria and in Ghana. The bombing of Nigeria, allegedly with the participation of a foreign power, is disturbing. There are rumors in Ghana that a foreign power is supplying weaponry to people in Burkina Faso, we don't know who. And this is because Ghana went into a security arrangement before the current government that basically opens up our skies and our water. We hear that Nigeria is having a conversation about the same type of arrangement. If Nigeria does become a military base for a foreign power, the effort to build sovereign Africa is gone.
I mean, those are some very strong allegations there, but then, as you have pointed out, as we do try to assert ourselves and build new ties with the recalibration, we need to hold on to our sovereignty. Finally, I'd like us to end on a high. What is working? We know that there have been several initiatives like the AFCFTA and what PAPS is doing, the cross-border payment system. How is that helping? And how can African countries deepen economic integration, reduce transaction costs, strengthen financial infrastructure, and also boost intra-Africa trade?
The cross-border payment system is absolutely a brilliant initiative. We have to do that bilaterally, multiple bilaterally, and make it work. And ACFTA is a platform for this. So I think we should do a lot more than that. We should expand that initiative. Country leadership of our countries should take leadership in reaching out to its neighbors. Cross-border payments work best between and among neighbors in a gradual way. It's a very good seed that has been planted. It should eventually probably be more important than the attempt to create common convergence criteria to get a single currency. It's unnecessary, and it is complicated, and it's expensive. So it is a big high. Countries should do that. The other high is that the African Union initiated the African Credit Rating Agency. It already had a very positive impact by intervening in the sovereign assessment of the sovereign risks of Kenya last year. And by its intervention, it prevented Kenya from being downgraded. That would have increased the cost and risks for Kenyan businesses and the Kenyan sovereign borrowing. I think it's a big plus. What it should do next is now to concentrate on the credit rating agencies that are located within Africa and are trying to rate African companies and African finance institutions. This is important because it will then enable the focus to be to reduce the risks within our countries and across countries to encourage investment by our companies. It shifts the focus from external sources of finance to domestic sources of finance. It tries to create an enabling environment for our local companies to invest and to grow. If the African Union and the initiatives of credit rating agencies shift in this way, it will complete the cycle and it will be a fantastic movement going forward.
Definitely a wake-up call for the continent. And of course, Nigeria being the rally points. Thank you so much for your contributions and the wake-up from you, Charles Abugre, the Executive Director of International Development Economic Associates.
Thank you for having me.